Hello, comrades, and welcome to another video on the Chinese Revolution area of Study 1. In this video, we're going to look at the alliance that formed between the Guomindang and the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, which is known as the First United Front, that being a front against warlords and imperialism. So here's a quote from Sun Yixian, which I won't delve into because we'll look at it in more detail and in its context shortly. But he says, "The Republic is my child. It is in danger of drowning. I am trying to keep it afloat, and we are being swept down the river." So we'll look at it in a bit more detail shortly. So first, let's have a look at the Guomindang and the Chinese Communist Party. So the Guomindang, as we know, was founded in 1912 by Sun Yixian. It was founded after the 1911 Jinhai Revolution and was an amalgamation, a joining of many revolutionary groups, including Sun's own Tongmenghui, and the party itself was founded in 1912. It follows Sun's three principles of the people, those being nationalism, democracy, and people's livelihood. And its primary mission was to unify China under a republican government. By 1923, Sun had transformed the GMD from a parliamentary party into a militant revolutionary group. So it started, its earliest beginnings, its origins were in revolution and being a revolutionary group. It moved towards being a parliamentary party, political party, under Yuan Shikai's government, Republican government. But then when Yuan Shikai banned the GMD and exiled Sun Yixian, then Sun started to revert it back to being a revolutionary group. By 1923, it became more authoritarian with a powerful executive committee and Sun Yixian as Grand Marshal. Now we'll look at that in a bit more detail shortly. Sun began forging links with individuals and groups, both in China and internationally, who could help him reunify China and reestablish a republican government. On the other hand, we've got the CCP. Founded in 1921 with the help of Comintern agents. We learned about the founding of the CCP in our last video, so go back there to find out a bit more about that. But there were 12 delegates, including Mao Zedong, present at the first Congress in 1921, and they represented a total of 57 members of the CCP, so it was an incredibly small group. By January 1925, its total membership was still less than 1,000 people. As such, the Comintern, who were the Communist Internationale, a Soviet group that was committed to encouraging international revolution. So the Comintern, considering the CCP too weak and underdeveloped, made many of the CCP's ideological, organizational, and tactical decisions at this time. One of those decisions was the Comintern directed CCP members to join the Guomindang and support its quest for national reunification. So these two very separate groups were now coming together to try with a shared goal of unifying China. So let's first look at the Guangzhou government. So as we know, Yuan Shikai had banned the GMD in 1913, and Sun Yixian had been exiled in Japan. Sun returned in 1917 after the death of Yuan Shikai, but he had little influence over the Beijing government. So it's important to note here that Yuan Shikai had really held China together, even though he had many flaws, and he is widely seen as a sort of villain in the whole story of the Chinese Revolution. He did keep China unified. After his death, China, that's when the warlord decade began. And so there were many warlords fighting over different provinces and having control of different areas. But there was still a Beijing government, a central Beijing government. They had very little power, but they still existed. So when Sun returned in 1917, he didn't have very much influence over this not very powerful, but still existing Beijing government. In August and September 1917, members of the old National Assembly gathered at Guangzhou, and on the 10th of September, Sun Yixian was elected Grand Marshal of a new military government. This government opposed the Beijing government, and they went so far as to send delegates to attend the 1919 peace treaty negotiations at Versailles. So that being the Treaty of Versailles that ended, that was the peace treaty to end World War I. So China sent many delegates to the peace treaty negotiations. So the Beijing government was the recognized government by the international community, but also various warlords sent delegates as well. It was, as we discussed with the May 4th movement, there was a lot of hope and a lot of attention on the peace treaty negotiations in Versailles. So Sun sent delegates from his Guangzhou government. His government, however, was quite weak and divided. And after falling out with his warlord backers, who basically backed him up and allowed him to be in Guangzhou, as well as later with his ally Chen Zhongming, Sun was forced into exile twice. Sun wanted to build up a military force to march north and reestablish the republic and unify China. But he didn't have any success in this. He attributed this lack of success to poor organization, lack of discipline, and a lack of ideological commitment within the GMD. So this desire to march north and reunify or reestablish the republic will feature in our next video with the Northern Expedition. So let's have a look at the Sun-Joffe Declaration. So in August 1922, so this is before Sun had created his Guangzhou government, Sun Yixian met with Comintern agents Maring and Adolf Joffe to discuss reorganizing the GMD with Soviet aid. Sun Yixian at this point needed all the support he could get, and he wasn't receiving any from other Western nations such as Britain and America, and he wasn't receiving any from Japan either. So he sought the help of the Soviets. The Comintern, that being the Soviet Communist International, began negotiating for a united front in which Chinese Communist Party members could take up individual membership in the GMD. On the 26th of January 1923, Sun and Joffe put out a joint manifesto outlining the goals of the United Front, those being national independence and national unity. So let's have a look at this source, which is the Sun-Joffe Declaration of 1923. Now, this isn't the entire declaration. However, it is a significant portion of it. Dr. Sun Yixian believes that the communist organization and the Soviet system cannot be adopted in China, since China does not have the conditions to make this adoption a success. Mr. Joffe completely agrees with this analysis. So basically this is saying that neither Sun Yixian nor the Comintern agents see China as a viable communist state at this point. Dr. Sun further believes that the most urgent problem China faces today is the successful unification of the republic and the completion of national independence. Regarding the undertaking of this important task, Mr. Joffe assures Dr. Sun that China not only enjoys the deepest sympathy of the Russian people, but can also rely on Russia's assistance and support. So this declaration basically finalizes and confirms that the Soviets are going to give financial aid and support to Sun Yixian and the GMD. Here is the longer quote from the quote that started this video. It's from Sun Yixian in 1923. He is quoted as saying, "The Republic is my child. It is in danger of drowning. I am trying to keep it afloat and we are being swept down the river. I call for help to England and America. They stand on the bank and jeer at me. Then comes a Russian straw. Drowning, I clutch at it. England and America on the bank shout at me on no account to clutch the Russian straw. But do they help me? No. They jeer themselves and at the same time tell me not to clutch that Russian straw. I know it is a straw, but better that than nothing." So basically, Sun Yixian has called for help from other Western nations like England and America, and they've refused to give it to him. So he knows that he needs support to achieve the unification of China. And so even though he doesn't entirely want to join forces with the Soviets, as is shown by this quote, he sees it as necessary for his goals. So the Comintern sent Mikhail Borodin to help the GMD reorganize. Sun sent his leading military man, Jiang Jieshi, who we will talk about in a bit more detail very shortly, on a 3-month military training in Moscow. While on this military training, Jiang Jieshi met with Trotsky, who, as we know from studying the Russian Revolution, was a powerful military figure and great military general. And Jiang Jieshi also got to observe the Soviet military and see how it was set up. Borodin, the Comintern agent sent to help the GMD, did a complete overhaul of the Guomindang. The first National Congress of the Guomindang, which happened between the 20th to the 30th of January 1924, approved a Leninist-style structure of democratic centralism, that being establishing a central executive committee, and the United Front was reaffirmed as a 3-way alliance between the Guomindang, the Chinese Communist Party, and the Comintern. Sun's 3 principles of the people were slightly changed to emphasize the need to rid China of warlord and imperialist rule and emphasize the role of workers and peasants. So just from these last 2 dot points, we can see that the Comintern were having great influence over the Guomindang at this point, and incorporating some socialist aspects, such as the democratic centralism and the increased role of workers and peasants. Many longtime GMD activists were impressed by the passion of the communists. Here's a great quote from GMD veteran Wang Jingwei, who will feature shortly. And he said, "The young people of the May 4th movement are something to be reckoned with after all." Now, this quote is great, not just because it shows that some GMD activists were quite impressed by the communists, but also it shows the connection between the May 4th movement of 1919 and the rise of the CCP, or the establishment of the CCP. 3 of the 24 seats on the GMD Central Executive Committee were given to communists, and the CCP members were given the task of rallying support from workers and peasants. Now, the Nationalist Army. I said we would talk about Jiang Jieshi in a bit more detail, and here he is. This is Jiang Jieshi, otherwise known as Chiang Kai-shek, and he will feature heavily from here on out. So the Soviets funded the founding of the Huangpu Military Academy, which trained and armed officers for a new nationalist army. On the 3rd of May, 1924, Jiang Jieshi, returning from his training in Moscow, was appointed head of Huangpu Military Academy and the commander-in-chief of this new nationalist army. Most graduates of the Huangpu Military Academy developed a strong loyalty to Jiang Jieshi, which will be significant quite shortly. Communists also attended, including Zhou Enlai, who served as chief political commissar of the academy until 1927. Now, in late 1924, after a conflict between northern warlords, a new government seemed likely in Beijing. So Sun Yixian, as one of the nation's best known political leaders, went to help with the negotiations and the setting up of this new government, hoping to have some influence over it. However, Sun had stomach pains when he arrived in Beijing and was taken to hospital, where he was diagnosed with chronic liver cancer. He died, not chronic, that's a bad use of the word chronic. He was diagnosed with liver cancer. He died in Beijing on the 12th of March, 1925, aged only 58. His final testament urged his followers to continue fighting for national reunification. That was his major goal, was to unify China under a republican government. And in a letter to Stalin and the Soviet government, Sun wrote, "I leave behind a party which, as I always hoped, will be allied with you in its historical task of liberating China and other suppressed peoples from the yoke of imperialism." So the death of Sun Yixian was quite significant because he was a major player in these first sort of 14 years of the revolution, and prior to that as well. His three principles of the people were the driving force behind the Guomindang, and he is seen as the father of the Republic of China, which today is Taiwan. So his death also had some consequences, which we'll discuss now. So there were consequences for the CCP, first of all. So the death of Sun Yixian was the first of several events in the mid-1920s that reshaped the revolutionary movement in China. First of all, and I'll mention this when talking about the GMD, Sun Yixian's death led to a sort of breaking up of the GMD into a left and right faction. And so there was less unity within the party in terms of their attitude towards the communists. So on the 30th of May, 1925, British guards fired on protesting textile workers in Shanghai, killing 11 people. This led to protests in Guangzhou in solidarity with the May 30 martyrs, which was broken up by British soldiers, leaving 52 dead. What's been termed the May 30 atrocious incident inflamed anti-imperialist feeling and renewed the protests of the May 4th movement. This led to enormous support for the CCP, as workers and students were increasingly attracted to the message of communist agitators and the message of the vision of communism and Marxism. So this growth of the CCP is highlighted in these figures. So as we know, when the CCP was founded, it had a total of 57 members. At the beginning of the United Front between the CCP and the GMD, that number had grown to 420 members, still not very significant. In 1925, as we've discussed previously, they still didn't have 1,000 members. But by the start of 1927, that number had grown to 57,000 members. So they grew exponentially in a very short period of time. Now, consequences for the GMD were primarily to do with the leadership of the GMD and the splitting up into left and right. So here is a quote from Jiang Jieshi to his wife. He said, "If I control the army, I will have the power to control the country. It is my road to leadership." So we can see that Jiang Jieshi was quite ambitious and had hopes of becoming leader of the GMD and leader of the country. And so that's a great quote to highlight that. So the death of Sun Yixian led to uncertainty about the leadership of the Guomindang. On the left, in the left faction, Wang Jingwei and Liao Zhongkai were the leaders, while Hu Hanmin led the right faction. And as we know, Jiang Jieshi controlled the military. On the 20th of August, 1925, Liao Zhongkai was assassinated by someone affiliated with Hu Hanmin. So Liao Zhongkai is now dead. Hu Hanmin was sent to Russia to receive re-education on communism. So there goes Liao Zhongkai and Hu Hanmin. That left a three-man leadership team of Wang Jingwei, Jiang Jieshi, and the Comintern agent Mikhail Borodin. On the 20th of March, 1926, a communist gunboat was alleged to have attempted to kidnap Jiang. Now, it's Jiang who says that the gunboat that was driven by communists attempted to kidnap him. Anyway, it was alleged to have happened, and Jiang blamed the CCP and then placed Soviet advisors under protective custody. As a result of this, the Guomindang CAC, the Central Executive Committee, resolved to remove several communists from senior positions with this quote, "Comrades on the left should retire for a while." So that leaves the Guomindang CAC and the United Front heavily favoring the GMD at this point. So less than 18 months after Sun Yixian's death, Jiang Jieshi had managed to secure his position as leader of the Guomindang, and he'd managed to sideline most of his political rivals. So this video sort of takes us up to 1926, around the end, towards the end of 1926. So we are approaching the end of the warlord decade. Our next video will outline how the warlord decade came to an end and how the GMD managed to secure control of the whole country. But this alliance between the GMD and the CCP was always a delicate one. And so after Sun Yixian's death, it really moved towards the right, with Jiang Jieshi taking control of the GMD, and the CCP was now losing influence in this united front. So I hope you found this video interesting and useful, and I will see you next time.